Hey everybody, welcome to Harmon Garage. I'm Aaron. We're back with another rum runner video. It's my Friday and it's rum runner day. So actually got some stuff moved around, made some room, got them in the shop. Did a little bit of work off camera. As you can tell, I took the bed off outside and then I pressure washed the frame, the rear end, the leaf springs, the fuel tank, everything back here. I pressure washed it really good. Got it in here yesterday evening and let it sit to dry. So today we're gonna do something neat. I told you guys that I had to take the front suspension off to change the motor mounts, and that I wanted to try to have the stuff to do the suspension before I did that, so I didn't have to take the lower control arms apart twice. Well, I got to looking around, and the lowering kits for these trucks have gotten ridiculous in price. And I'm not rich, so I can't afford to go buy one right now to do this, so I'm going old school. We're gonna lower this truck for 60 bucks. It'll be about a 3-4 drop, exactly what I wanted anyways. And be cost effective, budget, whatever you want to call it, and it's going to get the same look and probably a better ride. So that's what we're going to do today, so let's get started. All right, first thing I'm going to do here is drop this fuel tank out of the way, because it's going to make what I'm doing a lot easier, and because this had a fuel injected 4.3 in it originally, I'm gonna have to make some modifications to that sending unit to work with my carbureted motor. So I'll explain it more when we get to it, but I don't want to use the electric pump with a regulator. I'd rather just put a pickup tube in there and use a mechanical pump on the motor. So we'll get to that eventually. But the fuel tank just has 2 bolts on the straps that you take off. There's one that comes up through right here, and then there's another one up front. So, and then you got your 3 fuel lines here, your feed line, your return line, and your vent. So I got to take those loose and drop that tank, and then we'll move on to the fun stuff. All right, you can see I got the back of the truck jacked up. Jack stands, they're actually under the spring hangers, but they're holding the frame up, so the axle's just hanging. Now what I'm doing here is an old school hot rodders trick. This is what they used to do back in the day before they sold lowering kits for stuff. You can actually buy a kit to do this now, but it's $440 plus shipping plus tax. And I can do it for a couple hours worth of labor. So that's how we're gonna do it. Now I've got drop shackles for the rear, and then they're gonna give me about 2 inches. And then up here in the front, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna disconnect this leaf spring. I'm gonna take a measurement and draw a line on the frame that's perfect with the center of my leaf spring attachment bolt. And then I'm going to get a drill, and I'm going to drill out these rivets that hold this hanger on. Then we're going to do some modifications to that hanger, and we're going to raise that hanger up 2 inches. So we're going to go 2 inches higher with the hanger in the front, 2-inch shackle in the back, and that's going to give us 4 inches of drop in the rear. Like I said, you can buy a kit to do this if you got the money, want to spend the money, whatever. I don't, and I'm able to do it this way, so I'm just going to do it. It's a little bit harder this way than if you just buy the kit, but because you got to modify some stuff to make it work, but not that bad, and it's very cost effective. So I got everything set up and ready to go. I'm going to start pulling this leaf spring off. Alright, we got our leaf spring broke loose. It's just sitting in there now. So I'm going to get a drill bit and a drill. We're going to drill out these rivets. So as you can see, I got my spring hanger rivets out and I got my spring hanger off. Now, if you look here, this dips back to go like kind of underneath the frame on the truck, and we're going to raise this hanger up on the frame, so this is going to get in the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark this down along, straight down with this, and I'm going to bring it down. I could cut it all the way around if I wanted to, but I'm going to bring it down 2 inches because that's how far we want to raise this hanger. And then if I only bring it down 2 inches on both sides, then when I go to set this back up in there, it's going to hit the bottom of the frame like it did before. So we'll be in good shape. So I'm going to go ahead and get this marked out, and then we'll go ahead and cut it. Alright, as you can see, I got my marks on there, both sides. The way I did this to mark it, I took a square here and I ran it on the mounting surface like so, and then I kind of eyeballed my line, but if you look, it looks pretty good. So that's how I marked it. I measured down 2 inches. I got my lines to where I go back out. I'm going to leave that on there, and yeah, so now I'm going to just go ahead and cut these pieces off. If we got to go do a little cleanup with a grinder or something, that's no big deal. So we'll go ahead and get it cut. Got that all cut out. We'll clean it up a little bit before we permanently mount it, but now I measured down There's my top hole on the back side. I measured down exactly 2 inches and found my center. So now what I'm going to do is go over on the drill press and drill a 1/2 inch hole right there. And then when I take this and put it back, I'm just going to raise that hanger straight up and put a bolt in that top hole. And then from there I can go and decide how much of the top of this I need to cut off to clear the top of the frame. And I can mark other holes if any line up, so I know which ones I have to drill or not. So I'm going to go get this hole drilled, grab a bolt, and then we'll come back and throw it back on for the first time. Okay, I got my hole drilled in there, and I went to try to test fit it, and the piece I left on the bottom was obstructing with the frame. And then I already knew I was going to have to do this, but the bed mount here, I went ahead and took a piece that goes down like this off to give us more clearance. And then if you see in here, the bed mount comes out off the frame and it angles out. So what I'm going to have to do now is trim this ear down so that it'll slide up in there far enough. No big deal. I can get this up in there where I need it to be. Just like that. You see my line. See my line on the frame there. Still lined up with my hole, so we're good there. So I just need to mark this and trim it down. And then once I do that, I can mark the holes in the frame and mark some holes on our hanger here. And we'll re-drill the frame and then we'll bolt our hanger back on. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this, trim it off. I'll get that bolt in, and we'll probably just get a drill over here and start cutting stuff. I got my shackle back up there. Got bolt here, bolt on top. Got it secured. I'm lined up with my line that I marked. And I went over and measured the hanger on the other side for where this hole was, and I measured this one, and we're exactly 2 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and drill 2 more new holes in this, put bolts in, and then we'll move on to the next step. I think I'm clearing my rear brake line. If not, we'll probably end up replacing it. Yep, missed it. That's good. Alright. Drill another hole over here. And I actually went and bought a new drill bit, so we're actually getting somewhere drilling today. And I missed the brake line again. Man, I'm doing pretty good today. I'm just using 7/16 grade 8 bolts with flat washers and nylocks. That's the same size diameter as what the rivets that were in here was. So they'll hold it just fine. And I may even come back at the end and put a few spot welds on it. I gotta put a little tack on this bed mount. I don't have to, but it had one on the side and I cut it off. So I may come back and put a little bit of weld on it, but I don't need to. That ain't going nowhere. Alright, so if you go to do this on like a square body or something older, the bed mounts aren't here because the frame is flat up here and the bed mount's straight to the frame. So that's not in the way, and the shackles or the hangers are more straight up and down, they're not angled. It's a lot less involved of a process to do. So this still wasn't that bad. We just had to trim it up a little bit. On the square bodies, I know for sure you just take and cut 2 inches off the top of it, raise it up, re-drill the 4 holes, and you're done. It's a piece of cake. But this one was a little more involved. But we saved just these hangers to buy them individually is $140. So I've got maybe a half an hour in modifying this side, and I normally charge 50 bucks an hour for labor. So I got 25 bucks in this one, I'll have 25 bucks in that one. So it's not costing me anything because it's my labor on my truck. So, I mean, literally this is free. Maybe a couple cutting wheels to clean it up, whatever. But so that one's done. Now we're going to go to the back and put the drop shackle in and keep on going with this. Okay, I got this drop shackle. It's 1 or 2 inch. Literally goes in place of this shackle. I've had these sitting around for a while. When I bought these, they were like $35 shipped. I looked them up online just a little bit ago so I could be accurate with you guys, and now they're like $54. So I said I'm going to lower this whole truck 3/4 drop for 60 bucks. This is all you have to buy, and maybe a couple bolts, but I mean bolts are cheap. So this is it right here. Obviously it's a 1 or 2 inch drop. I don't even know why they put the 1 inch hole in, because why would you waste your time on that? But so we're going to go ahead and cut this shackle loose now. There we go. Okay, now a little bit of explanation. You may have noticed I didn't put the front hanger bolt back in yet. The main reason is because you can't, this bolt in the top of the shackle goes from the inside out. Obviously it can't go in to get it out. So by leaving that front loose, it gives us a little more play to get that spring up to take the bolt out. And then when I put them back together, no matter what I'm working on, I always run the bolt in from the outside. That way when the truck's all together and all that, I mean, if the bed was on this thing, it's damn near impossible to get this bolt out without taking the spring out. So I turn them around, run them in the other way, just in case you ever need to do anything with it. Makes your life a whole lot easier. So I'm going to grab a pry bar, pry this up, pop that bolt out, get that shackle out, and I think you got it figured out by now. like that. And we got our shackle. We're going to put it in the same way that one came out. Your bottom bolt you want to put in from the inside out, because then when you're underneath the truck trying to take it off, it comes out really easy. But the top one, you definitely want to turn around. So. Now when you do this, it doesn't leave you a lot of room in here. The bolt sticks out pretty far, and you want to cycle your suspension to make sure it's not going to hit. If it does, then you need to take and trim a little bit of the end of the bolt off. Just don't get too close to that lock nut when you do it. Just only cut what you need. Now when you tighten these down, you don't want to crank them down as tight as they'll go. You want to snug them up but leave them loose, because they got lock nuts on them. They got lock nuts on them, so they're not going to back off. And this is made to move. That's how your suspension works. This flexes. So if you go and cram that bolt as tight as you can get it, it's got your suspension locked down. It's going to wear stuff out, and it's going to make for a real rough ride. So you want to just run those down to where they're snug but not hammered tight, so that the suspension has room to move. And then like right now, I got this axle jacked up so that I can, so I could get this bolt in. And so when I get this bolted up, I'll go put the front bolt in, and then I'll lower that jack down, and I'll watch this shackle and see if it moves. If it moves, I know I'm good. If it doesn't move, I know I got it too tight. Okay. Now we're gonna go back up here, see what we got to do to get our front bolt in. And now, because we moved that up where this bolt goes through, it used to come through from the backside, but it can't now because there's a frame rail there. So we're probably going to have to shorten this bolt too. But and we need our shackle to come forward, which can't right now because that bolt's going to hit. So I'm going to go ahead and trim that bolt I told you might need to trim off, and then we'll get this lined up and get this bolt back in. Alright, this is what we got. Got our hanger chopped down, got it bolted back on, we got our front bolt back in. I did end up having to trim about 3 threads off of that bolt so it wouldn't hit the frame. Got our shackle in the rear. I had to trim about 3 threads off of this bolt just so it would clear if it comes past the brackets. Everything's tight but loose enough that it can move. So if you come over now and look at this side, it's sitting on jack stands in the back, and this tire is still kind of halfway touching the ground. This tire is not. So we got our drop done on this side. I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side, but for right now I'm going to move on and do the front so I can show you guys each step in this process. And while we have the front apart, I'm going to pull that lower control arm off and change the motor mounts, and we get the right motor mounts in there. You know what that means. That's right, motor's going in. So let me get everything set up. We'll move up to the front and keep going with this lowering kit. Okay, while I still have the tire on, I'm going to go ahead and check the ball joints, tie rods, wheel bearings, make sure everything's tight, because if it's not, now would be the time to replace it. If it is, I'm not going to bother replacing it right now because I'm not going to fix something that ain't broke. I already looked at the sway bar bushings the other day when I was painting, and they look fine. So got a little bit of wheel bearing play. We'll repack those. Tie rods are tight. I got a little bit of play in my idler arm over there, but as far as suspension over here, what we're going to have apart, everything feels good. So I'm going to grab a socket, bust this tire off, and we'll get started. Front brakes are hanging up a little bit. Might have to do the old hose and flush on them. So, alright, we got that off. Now I'm going to have to pop my tie rod loose. I'm going to take my sway bar loose, which I want to take off the paint anyways. I'm going to take my brake caliper off. And pretty much, and I got a shock here I got to take loose. So I'm going to go grab some tools and get to it. Okay, if you guys just saw that struggle I had to get that caliper off, we are going to go back with new rotors, new calipers, and brake hoses, partially because of terrible mechanic work. If you look at this and see how thick this side of the rotor is and how thin that side of the rotor is, that tells me that caliper's been dragging for a long time. Okay, so it's been dragging, it ate down the rotor. It happens. But this thing's got brand new brake pads in it. I mean, like brand new. It don't even have any wear on them. So that tells me somebody was like, oh, my brakes are grinding. And they slapped some new pads on it and kept on dragging it down the road. So you can see the grooves in the back of this rotor. They've worn themselves into the pad. And I'm going to go ahead and throw wheel bearings in it when I do the rotors also, because that should spin a lot freer than that. So looks like we're getting a whole front brake rebuild on this one. So we're going to keep going with the lowering kit, and we'll look into that later on. Alright, now I got everything pretty much out of the way. I just got a little pick here, and I'm just going to try to dig a bunch of this dirt out of this lower ball joint nut, just to make sure it doesn't appear that there's a cotter key in there. But I just want to make sure before I, oh yeah, there's a cotter key in there. There it is right there. Alright, I got the cotter key out. I'm going to grab a wrench or a socket that fits on that and see if we can't get it loose. I'm going to spray some PB Blaster on it real quick and let it sit for a few minutes. Hopefully it'll loosen up some of that dirt in there. Alright, I got my socket. Jeez. I'm going to bust my lower ball joint loose. And I'm going to back the nut off. I want to leave it on there some, but not all the way. So I've got a few good threads in there. And then a lot of times you can just take and hit the side of the spindle, and the pressure from the spring that's still in there will be enough to pop that ball joint loose. So that's what I'm going to try first. I don't usually just throw calipers around like that, but that one's getting replaced, so I don't really care. Alright, I guess we're going to have to use the pickle fork. Jeez, I can't even get that in there. There we go. Now it's in. There we go. I guess I had this turned the wrong way so you guys couldn't really see it, but did you see that pop when the rotor dropped down? That was our ball joint breaking loose. So now I gotta get the floor jack underneath that lower control arm. I'm going to put a little bit of pressure back on that ball joint where my nut's loose. We'll go ahead and take that off. Now, I'm going to go get back out of there, over there out of the way, because that spring's got a lot of tension on it. So, cover your eyes, make sure nothing flies in your face. Oh, come on. Ah, gee. I really don't want to be in the middle of this. I've got the jack under there holding weight, but for some reason this ball joint's not wanting to let out. There we go. Don't try this at home without a supervising professional. This is pretty dangerous. Now I'm going to let that jack all the way down. That spring still going to have some load on it. It's still sitting in there in the back of that control arm. I'm going to get in here with a pry bar. Try to get this control arm down more and get that pressure off. And that spring's going to pop just like that. And you don't want to be in front of it when it happens. Come on. Man, this thing is giving me a fight today. I think I'm going to take the back end off the jack stand. This thing's wandering quite a bit. Alright, well, this project kind of snowballed. I was just going to lower the truck, and then I got to the front end, and when I was pushing it around, I was having a hard time pushing it, so I was dragging it or pushing it with the tractor and stuff like that to get it to move. And when I went to take the front wheels off and take the front end apart, lower it, the wheel bearings were real tight. They didn't really want to turn. The brakes were dragging, all that stuff. So I was like, well, I'm already this far into it. I'm going to go ahead and redo the brakes and the wheel bearings on the front. But I went to the parts store and they didn't have any parts. So I ordered everything Friday. Today's Monday. I picked it all up this morning. They couldn't get me the calipers, and I don't feel like looking for them. So I'm going to flush them out, work them back and forth a little bit, make sure they're moving, and we'll put them back on. But I got new rotors, new wheel bearings, new seals, new brake hoses, and I ordered shocks this morning, but we can get it back together without the shocks. I can put them back on later. So first thing I'm going to do today is drop the lower control arm off, and then we can change out the motor mount on this side. And then once we get that motor mount changed out, I'll put the lower control arm back on, and we can go ahead and start putting this side back together, and I'll show you how we're lowering it. So here we go. All right, I got the lower control arm out of the way. This isn't really going to be a fun thing to do. Even with that out of the way, I still got limited access to this stuff. So we're going to do the best we can and see how it goes. think I seen it move that time, so we might be in good shape. Yep, there we go. Got that off. I'm going to take these same bolts back out and we'll use them again. Now we got our new motor mounts. They're just standard V8 clamshell mounts. I'm going to clean up underneath where that other mount was sitting that I couldn't get to with paint the other day. I'm going to shoot a light layer of paint on it real quick, and then we'll get these new mounts put in. These motor mounts used to come painted, but for some reason I guess they stopped painting them. They were powder coated or something. I guess they're trying to keep costs down or whatever, like everybody else is. So we'll just wipe them down real quick. Alright, now I'm not going to take my upper control arm off or my spindle all the way off, so I'm just going to clean those up the best I can get them, and I'll shoot some paint on those, and then I'm going to clean up and paint my lower control arm and shoot some paint on that, and then I'll get back with you guys and we'll start slapping this stuff back together. Okay, while I'm letting the paint dry on the front suspension parts, we're going to go ahead and do our lowering part for the front. Now I know I'm going to catch a bunch of slack about this, but to lower the front, I'm cutting the springs. So what we need to do is to drop it 3 inches in the front like we want to. That's generally about 1.5 coils. Now I know people are going to say, oh, you can't cut springs, you're not supposed to cut springs, whatever, and that's fine. Everybody's got their own way of doing things. I've done it quite a few times before, and I'm not cutting the spring in half. I'm not heating it up to weaken it. I'm literally just making it shorter, which is going to take some of the weight load away, which is going to let it settle down further. I'll take it and I'll get an alignment on it and it'll be fine. So I need to go 1.5 coils, which is going to be, that's going to be 1 and then 1/2, which is going to be over here. So I need to take this spring and cut it right here about the same way that it's done over here. So I'm going to go a little over half. We're going to make it square right here. So I'll get my safety glasses and my cutoff wheel and we'll whack this spring off real quick. Keep in mind this is spring steel, so it's not as easy to cut. It's going to take a while. You're just going to want to take your time and let it work its way through. Just like that. We took our 1.5 coils off, and now we got our shorter spring. Now, I don't recommend cutting springs because that's what I'm supposed to say, but when you do cut, if you do cut a spring, I always make sure you cut it from the bottom. You don't ever want to cut the top, because the top's made to sit flat up in that perch just right. So you want to make sure that you cut the bottom and not the top. And like I said, just go through, be careful. Once the lower control arm's dry and I start putting this back together, I don't know if I'll be able to get you in there close enough to see it, but there's a little pocket in the lower control arm where this ear's going to sit down in there. And once you get the weight back on, it's going to flatten that spring out so it sits flat down in there. So it's going to be fine. That's how we're lowering the front. I'm going to give that paint a little bit longer to dry, and then we'll start putting all this stuff back together. Alright, well, I'm going to say the paint's pretty well dry. Not all the way dry, but dry enough I can work with it. So I need to keep moving on this. I'm going to go ahead and start putting it back together. Throw this lower control arm back on. It's a little warm in here today. It's rainy and humid outside. Alright, I got my bolts back in my lower control arm. Now I'm going to go ahead and not going to tighten anything up yet. I'm going to put my spring in, get my lower ball joint hooked back up, and then I'll go ahead and tighten everything down all at once. So if I can just find my nut for my lower ball joint in this huge mess I got going on over here, and we'll be in good shape. There it is. Alright, so when we took our spring out, this rubber isolator was sitting on top of the spring and fell off. Whether you're cutting springs or not, no matter what you're doing, you want to make sure that rubber isolator goes back in there, because that stops with suspension squeak when you're hitting bumps and stuff. So we're going to get this spring back up in our upper pocket. Like so. We're going to turn it so that the bottom sits in to that groove. Now this is going to go back together a lot easier than it came apart, because you don't have all that spring tension in there. Alright, we got our spring up in there. trying to check and see if it's in its pocket on top. I believe it is. Got our bottom ball joint all the way in. Now, once you get this all screwed down, until you get the weight back on the vehicle, it might be a little bit loose. The spring might be a little loose in there. But you just want to make sure when you lower the vehicle back down that the spring's sitting good. I've never really had much of a problem with it. They usually find their home and sit in there fine. So we're going to go ahead and tighten up our ball joint, hook it back up, and then we'll tighten up our control arm. Got our cotter keyhole lined up and put our cotter key in. I'm gonna go ahead and tighten this control arm up and double check everything, and then we'll slap these brakes back together. Alright, so got my brand new rotors, I got new bearings. First thing I'm gonna do is take brake parts cleaner and clean this rotor really good, because they put that oil and stuff on them so they don't rust in packaging and sitting on the shelf and whatnot. And you don't clean them good, they tend to slip and smoke a lot until you burn that off. So go ahead and wipe that down good and make sure we get all that oil off. You can really see it on this side. You see all that brown film? It's like sticky. I can't even hardly drag my finger across it. So usually you can take brake parts cleaner and spray it and you can watch it come off. This stuff's not even coming off when I spray it. So I got plenty of it on there for sure. Alright, got that all cleaned up. Now I got all new bearings and seals. And they sold me the loaded bearings that come with the races, but I'm not going to change out the races because these are brand new rotors and they've already got races in them. So for the $1 a piece difference that they cost or whatever, it ain't worth it to me to take it back and get the non-raced ones. I'll just not use the races. So there's my bearing. Now I have like 3 different bearing packers in there, but I prefer to do it by hand. So if you've never done it this way before, take and put a big old glob of grease in your hand, and then you see that little lip, like the carrier on the bearing. You take that and you want to take it and squeeze it down in between there and your middle part of your bearing that rides on the spindle. And you just keep working it in the same spot, working it in the same spot, and then you'll see the grease starts coming through between there. When it comes all the way through, then you know you got grease packed in that orifice and you're good. Turn it a little bit, move to the next spot, you got grease coming through there, and just keep going all the way around until you get grease going all the way through. And you'll get a lot of grease all over everything. But you do with the Packers too, but you just want to, you can clean it out and use some more of that grease. And just keep going until you get it all packed. Once you got grease coming out of that cavity there all the way around, then you know your bearing's packed. I usually take some grease and just smear it across the outside of the rollers just so they're lubed before they start turning. Kind of clean off any excess. And that's it, that bearing's packed. But they gave me the wrong rotor or the wrong bearing because I didn't check it first and I just packed that bearing and it don't fit in there. So does it fit on here? I bet it's too big for the spindle too. Yep, too big for the spindle too. So I got the right spindles, obviously. Got the right rotors, but wrong bearings. So I guess I will take a break and we'll get the right stuff and come back. Alright, went over to the hardware store and surprisingly enough they had the right bearings in stock. They just made a mistake. Got their numbers crossed between the heavy duty and the regular. I needed the regular, they gave me the heavy duty inner bearing. So we got the right one. I came back and slammed the brakes on. I showed you guys how to grease the bearings. All I did was put the seal in, put the bearings in the rotor, put it back on. I put our new brake hose on. I did the same thing to the caliper. The little hack that I showed you guys on the hot shot truck. I just took the bleeders and the banjo bolt out, flushed it out. It was nasty brake fluid in there. I got it cleaned out real good. And I left that brake line off all weekend, so it gravity bled everything out of the master cylinder down and out. I'll do the same thing on the other side and clean that one good. But it's all back together, and that's what we're doing for our lowering kit. It's going to give us about 3 inches in the front, 4 in the back, and by the time we get that V8 and the transmission in there, should give us a little bit of a rake to the front, which is what I want. So I know you're saying, oh, you can buy a kit and just put it in and have new springs and everything's right, or you can buy springs and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you can. But I'm a poor boy. I've always been a poor boy, and I know how to make things that I need instead of buying them. And that's what I like to do. And I just didn't want to spend the extra money to buy a kit right now. So lowering a truck for 60 bucks. I mean, granted the brake parts and everything cost me money, but I was gonna have to do that anyways. So, I mean, if you wanna buy a kit, cool. If not, this is an alternate way to do it, and it's gonna look exactly the same, and it honestly rides a little bit better because cutting those front springs makes them a little softer. You start getting lowering springs in there and they're real rigid because they're so short, but they keep the same weight load to them. And they give you a little bit of a rough ride. When you cut them and take some of the spring tension away, it rides a little smoother. In my opinion, I like it. So that's what we're doing. I'm not gonna film doing the other side. I'm just gonna go ahead and knock it out and get this thing set on the ground so I can show you what it looks like lowered. And then we're gonna get the fuel tank. I'll bring the camera back and we'll make the changes to the fuel tank that I'm gonna make, and we'll get it back in and we'll see what else is going on. But for now, I wouldn't do this on a customer truck unless they ask me to. I mean, I wouldn't have somebody bring me a truck and go, hey, I want my truck lowered, and I'd just bring it in and start hacking it up and welding it back together. But this is my truck. I've done it a lot. I know it's safe. I'm not concerned with it at all. So my truck cost me 60 bucks to lower it. I'm good with it. I like it. So anyways, I'm gonna go get that other side knocked out, and then we'll come back and do that gas tank. All right, you guys ready to see this thing sitting on the ground with the wheels back on it? Keep in mind the front's a little bit lower than it's gonna be because I don't have the sway bar hooked back up yet. I don't have shocks in it, any of that stuff. But it made quite a difference. She's by the time I get the weight of the bed and stuff back on, it's gonna bring the back down a little bit. And the front might come up a little bit with everything hooked back up, but it's probably gonna sit right about where it is. But I'm happy with it. I didn't want it like slammed on the ground. I just wanted it to have more of a sporty look, I guess you'd say. More of a performance type deal. Just for looks, no purpose, but got the front all done. Everything's painted up. V8 motor mounts are in. And got this side done back here, same as the other side. I haven't decided if I'm gonna paint the frame or not yet. I might just leave it because, I don't know, it's not a show truck. Once you put the bed back on, you can't see it. I don't know. I just did the front because I wanted the engine compartment to look good. But yeah, I'm really happy with it. It turned out good, and it only cost 60 bucks in a day's work. So that's how you lower a 91 OBS for $60. So the next thing we're gonna do, I'm pretty sure I talked about this already before, but I'm running a carburetor motor in this truck, and this has an electric fuel pump for a 4.3 V6 with a throttle body. And I know I can go get fuel pressure regulators and all that stuff and run this pump with the carburetor motor and everything else, but I don't want to. Electric fuel pumps are just one more thing to go out. You got to drop the tank to change them. It just becomes a real pain in the butt where I can bolt a mechanical fuel pump to the side of the motor, hook it up. If it goes out, it's 25 bucks and it takes me 25 minutes to change it, if that. I mean, it's no big deal at all. I'd much rather have that. The mechanical pump will feed plenty to that carburetor for this motor. And so I'm gonna set up and we're gonna pop this sending unit out, and I'll show you guys how I'm gonna delete the electric fuel pump. So I'll show you that, and then we'll see what's going on after that. All right, this fuel tank is just one of the, just like all of them. It's got a locking ring here, so I'm just gonna take my locking ring off, pull my pump and sending unit out. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that if this still had that V6 in here, probably wouldn't have ran very good, because that rubber hose that goes in between the electric pump and the sending unit, she gone. And the sock is also no more. So kind of glad I did this instead of just hooking it up anyways. So we got that out of the way. Ew, that's nasty. Okay, so I'll get what's left of that rubber and that clamp off of there. I can go ahead and cut my 2 fuel pump wires because they ain't doing no good sitting down in the tank. So we'll cut those. And then, oh hey look, there's what's left of the screen. I'm gonna see if I got something long enough to reach down in there and grab that. And tank's pretty empty and it looks fairly clean, so that's good. I'm gonna see if I can get something to get that old pickup tube sock out of there, and then we will I'll show you what we're doing. Alright, you can see over here I got it out, but I'm gonna have to come back with a shop vac or something like that and clean it out, because it's got all the chunks of rubber from that hose that came apart and all that down in there, and I don't want to suck them up right from the get-go. So yeah, so I'll show you guys what I'm going to do to the sending unit to make it for a mechanical fuel pump instead of an electric fuel pump, and then I'll finish this up and put the tank back in later on. So I got this here. It's a fuel line repair kit for Chrysler, GM, yada yada yada. It's this plastic tube resistant to fuel, and I got the size that's about the same size as our tube here on our pickup. So what you do with this stuff is, you don't want to melt it, but you take it and you heat it up. You can kind of tell when you got it heated enough because it starts getting shiny. You don't want to heat it too much because it defeats the purpose and it just turns into jello. So then I'm going to take that and yep, I heated it too much. Alright, awesome. Good thing I got an extra long piece. We'll just go ahead and cut that off. Start over. Alright, so basically what I'm going to do here is take this plastic tube and put it over the top of this other tube, and then we'll cut it off down here at the bottom where this screen is, or where the bottom of the pump used to be, and that'll give us our new fuel tube. So I'm going to get some emery cloth real quick, and I'm going to clean this up a little bit so this goes on better, and then we'll get it on there, heat it up, and that'll be it for this. So let me get this cleaned up, let me get it on there, I'll show you guys what it is, and then we'll have our fuel pickup modified. Alright, so this is what it is. This tube's nice and solid. I got it stretched out over that original pickup where the pump hooked up to, and I cut it off at an angle down here so it wouldn't draw suction to the bottom of the tank if it was a little too long, but it shouldn't be because the sock normally sits like right here. So I won't be able to run the tank to empty, like no more drops of gas in it, but I always fill up at a quarter tank anyways, so that doesn't really matter to me. But that's the idea I had. I've never done it before. I just thought of it and said, hey, I bet you that'll work. So I did it. We'll see if it works. It's not coming back off, I mean, and that plastic line, whatever it is rated for fuel, pressurized fuel, because it goes in a pressurized, it's made to repair a line in a pressurized fuel system. So just sitting there in decent gas all the time should be fine, I think. So I will run it for a little while once I get the truck done and let you guys know, but I think it's going to work fine. I have a heck of a mess to clean up. I already started cleaning some of it up and said not today. Seems like a good project for in the morning, but I'm really happy with the way the truck's sitting. I think I'm gonna like it. It should come pretty close to being level when everything is hooked back up and all done, and I'm excited. That's plenty low for me. I don't want to have to swerve around every speed bump and drive sideways through dips to get into parking lots and stuff like that. That's just too much for me. That's a gnarly spider. I don't know if you guys can. Like hairy and everything. I think they're called wolf spiders or something. I don't know. But sorry, I didn't mean to get distracted. But I'm happy with the way the truck's sitting. I think it looks good. And the suspension is done and the V8 motor mounts are on, which, you know what that means? Yeah. Next video, it's getting the motor. Maybe not the next video, but the next video on Rum Runner, it'll be getting the motor and trans put in it. And yeah, so appreciate all you guys watching. Hopefully this is helpful to somebody that doesn't have a lot of money and wants to lower their truck, but has enough ability to do it themselves. And I spent like $32 or something on those drop shackles. And I've got 8 bolts, 16 lock washers, and 8 nylocks. It's the only thing I bought to lower the truck. Obviously, I spent a couple $100s on brake parts and wheel bearings and all that, but I was already that far into it. It would have been dumb to not just do it, because I'd have had to tear it all back apart again later. So, it's just one step further forward for me. I got the brakes are good. I checked all the bushings and everything, and they're all in real good shape. Like, they're not even dry rot cracked or anything. So everything's tight up there. Everything moves good. So we're getting really close to 2,000 subscribers, like really close. I'm excited about that. And it's because of you guys watching the videos, liking the videos, sharing the videos, commenting on the videos. So keep up the good work. I appreciate you guys. Please comment, like, share, subscribe if you're not. And y'all have a good one, and we'll see you next time.